Introduction, Iraj. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you today. I'm looking forward to walking you guys through some of our exciting developments here. And so I believe if all is working as we would like it to, I think you'll be able to see my screen now. Yes, what we're building here at ReForestry is the future of investments in climate resilient agriculture communities. And I'm excited to share some of our planned use case for blockchain technology. Just a little bit of story here. My partner and I, we both started working in finance about 7 to 8 years ago. And even though we didn't know each other and we were on opposite sides of the world, after about 7 years working in finance, we kind of hit these walls where we noticed that we felt like we were living a life that was kind of void of meaning and purpose. We didn't feel like we were really contributing to society or making the world a better place. And so we set out on these own personal individual journeys to go and travel and kind of rediscover ourselves. And through reconnecting with nature and also through connecting with farmer and agricultural communities, we were finding that there are a significant amount of opportunities, beauty, and then also problems on this planet that are taking place. We saw that the climate's changing. We saw that the land is changing. We saw that humans are changing. There's all of these massive shifts that are taking place at this current period in time. And fundamentally, what this creates for us is a food and timber systems risk that is unprecedented for our time. Now, when we're looking at some of the market opportunities, we were saying, well, there's this massive timber deficit that's taking place around the world. We're also seeing that food demand has doubled in just the last 10 years. And kind of sitting at the center of all of this, we've got about 570 million smallholder families, and when you include, 570 million smallholder farmers, and when you include their families, you're looking about a quarter of the world's population, and in some of their regions, they're responsible for up to 80% of the world's food production. We're looking at how can we use traceability, transparency, and continuous improvement to be able to address some of these different issues that we're looking at. This is where artificial intelligence and blockchain technology came into the forefront of our minds here. We're looking at how farmers and local labor communities currently have limited to no access to finance, to inputs, to capacity development, life cycle support, carbon markets, and technology. We're looking also at how buyers are exposed to supplier crop losses. They're exposed to side selling. Buyers are also required to have large capital expenditures to create industrial plantations. And when we look at investors, there's many different sustainability initiatives. However, there's relatively little to no transparency and almost no credibly measured impact when we're looking at these different actors within this ecosystem. So we set out to develop some solutions to that. We wanted to be able to provide farmers with increased income and life cycle support through giving them access to capital inputs and training. Similar for the local labor force, we want to give them access to a job pool. When we're looking at buyers, we would love for them to have a traceable supply chain and ultimately creating these de-risked climate resilient supply chains. And on the investor side, we would love for them to have transparent investments so they know exactly where their money is going and what kind of impact it's having. So on the reforestry side, we see an opportunity to create scalable acquisition in a way that's leveraging a core analytics platform through a modular API database and machine learning decision-making to increase payment for ecosystem services, such as carbon sequestration, water regulation, crop yield, etc. So we have to do this through looking at how we are growing these farm systems first as part of our risk management strategy. If we're able to have farmer financing, be able to create the beginning of this diversification stream where we can move towards these diversified income farms, we can not only increase farmer yields, but we can also make them climate and market resilient. If something wipes out a particular crop due to heat stress, the likelihood of other crops being able to survive through intercropping are much higher. And also when market prices swing for a particular crop, with diversification, farmers will not have all their eggs in one basket and be able to continue selling other species that they are cultivating. We're doing all of this through this decentralized finance program where we've got the farmers, the local laborers, the buyers, and the investors that are all part of this ecosystem. Investors are providing their capital for investment in exchange for an ESG bond. We're also looking through this blended finance approach where we can have traditional special purpose vehicles with fiat currency. But this is where it's really interesting on the blockchain side, where we would love to be able to use things like non-fungible tokens, where we can package real natural assets into ESG bonds, into portfolios where we can then issue ESG bonds out to these investors. through these digital unique codes, which are created through different protocols, where we can actually verify through smart contracts that these performance, these different kinds of indicators are in fact real and validated. We can then build trust within these kinds of communities and operations to manage risk more effectively. We're building this program with these apps, with these tools. These are the tools that are in the toolbox. We're essentially developing 4 different apps for the smallholder farmers, the local laborers within their communities, the investors, and then also the buyers. The farmers are able to select their personal and financial objectives, select their farming systems, get the financing and lifecycle support that they need, and also have access to a digital e-wallet. Similarly for the local labor force, in addition to being able to be financed for vehicles and equipment, everyone within these communities has access to a job pool where they can post help, or they can request help, and they can be able to service and train one another, creating these self-improving communities. Investors are able to choose their risk profiles and rewards and watch their investment impact grow. Buyers are able to trace their purchase orders, simplify their order management, and then also reduce their supply chain threats by converting their suppliers within their supply chain towards regenerative practices through our program. So we're approaching this through, FIN, forecast, invest, and nurture. This is our sort of take on FinTech, where we're using biosocioeconomic data to enhance the farming systems and to select farmers. We're investing in those communities, and then we're nurturing them throughout that life cycle support. When we first look at forecasting, we're looking at how we're changing the farm over time. When we're looking at investing and nurturing, it's about investing in these village communities, having these assessments, consultations, and co-planning with the communities, going through this onboarding process, establishing the nurseries and model farms, using the phones and apps for financing, payment, operations management, traceability, and the labor network, and then gamifying the system in a way that allows us to have a reward system for all of the knowledge sharing and support that is given back and forth within this ecosystem. This ultimately creates self-improving villages, cultivating the knowledge, wealth, and enhancement of ecosystem services. We're using biosocioeconomic data models where we can both start at the biosphere, the most fundamental layer of life, where everything is sustained, then looking at the next layer of social risks, and then economic risks. And by fusing these 3 things together to create a triple bottom line model, which ultimately gives us a profit and risk scorecard that helps us with farm system prediction and lending decisions. This tech platform is using this algorithm, which is continually improved through bioeconomic data coming from these different databases through an API network, but it's also through user feedback where we can leverage local and indigenous knowledge. This improves the algorithm to provide a better tech platform for farmers and local laborers in a way that increases the community potential by providing more jobs, increasing the income of those jobs, providing access to training, and increasing the value of the ecosystem services within those communities. So how we're earning, our business model is essentially looking at using risk-adjusted fair interest rates on the lending for these farmer communities where we're providing the financing. Buyers would pay for purchase transaction fees and supply chain traceability fees. And again, this is all very possible to do through blockchain technologies, having verification and validation of the different interactions, the activities that are taking place within this supply chain. Now, right now we're headed to East Africa. In just 3 weeks, we'll be flying out to East Africa where we're looking at a pilot program of 500 hectares where we'll be impacting 1,000 farmer families. We have a buyer who's interested in acquiring $325 million worth of agroforestry produce over the next 4 years, namely palm fruit, moringa, timber species, and corn and sunflower. We're hitting both like some of the major high value crops, timber, and then also biomass for creating biofuels in this system. So when we look at ourselves compared to some of our competitors, we see Comas as being one of the closest ones where, however, they're currently really focused on monoculture eucalyptus propagation, where we're looking at a much more diverse palette of species. When we look at smallholder farmer agroforestry as being decentralized and massive private plantations as centralized agroforestry systems, we're in this unique position where we're actually looking at how can we aggregate through these smart technologies smallholder farmers in a way that makes them ready for pension-sized fund investments. Whereas currently a lot of smallholder farmer initiatives are simply not institutionally ready for large investments because there is no scalability that is integrated into a lot of the programs that other companies are using. My team right here, we have a co-founding partner, Beltrand, in Sydney, Australia, myself here near San Francisco, with some really great experiences in both startups and corporate backgrounds, from financial technology companies to environmental restoration. We just got our director of engineering from IBM and our director of risk data science from Social Finance and Chase. We're building out these 4 apps over the next couple of years, and we're going to be integrating all of this through a cloud infrastructure platform that's using APIs, which is going to be building out these lending and bioeconomic economic models that I was discussing. We'll be launching this pilot program in East Africa, then moving over to Latin America. We're raising 11 million in funding with 6.5 million in senior debt and 4.5 million in equity financing. We've got about 40% of that in total conditionally secured. And this is where we're looking to basically improve the livelihoods of more than 500,000 smallholder farmer communities through, improving the way that we can collaborate with nature. It's about working with nature, thinking globally and acting locally, valuing empowerment instead of control, thinking fearlessly, and having integrity at the core of everything that we do. Now, I want to be able to invite us to think a little bit more about how we can use these blockchain technologies in a way that allows us to increase transparency, traceability, and use it for impact. We're seeing ways now where certain things that simply just weren't possible just a few years ago now are becoming things which we can very much now do today. If we were to look at things like the possibility of using NFTs, non-fungible tokens, in a way where, what if we could tie these NFTs to social and environmental key performance indicators? This is something that we're looking at right now at ReForestry, is how can we leverage social and environmental impact in a way that actually makes it a market where one could speculate for the betterment of humanity. It's really wonderful being able to trade, these kind of digital baseball cards, if we want to call it that, where people can purchase art, for example, which, sometimes the art looks really intriguing. However, what if some of these purchases for NFTs could be actually creating good on the ground? There are some companies that are looking at selling NFT art to finance the propagation of trees, the planting of trees. What if we can tie NFTs to things like literacy of a community or the soil carbon content of a community? And what if investors were buying these digital baseball cards, these collectible items, buying into these NFTs, which they can look back at a point in time and think, wow, I have this token that represents an investment in this community when it was previously a desert, and now it is this large forest. There are these opportunities where, similarly, where if we're looking at youth employment, gender equality, what if there are actually protocols that we could put into place to allow for NFTs to drive this social and environmental impact? This is something that we're looking at pursuing as part of our blended finance model, and where some of these potential use cases for blockchain technologies can be really empowering and provide us with a lot of fantastic opportunities to improve the relationship that we have with nature. So I want to thank you all for having me here today, and I would love to open the floor up to some questions.
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot. And it was a pleasure having you with a totally new perspective of making blockchain a means to a better world, and ensuring that we create investable asset out of creating value for the community itself, whether it is about giving back to earth, increasing the carbon content of the soil, or, as you rightly said, that if a community get educated, right, that can be a better baseball card than maybe a beautiful piece of art, because that ends up helping the community. I just got one question for you, Bernard. This whole idea of, like, because you have been working on that it is, I'll say that it is on an intersection of philanthropy, right? Ensuring that the world is a better place by taking care of nature. And then there is also, right, a very important pertinent point that when the corporations look at it, right, how do you see that their perception of whether to see it as a business or just to see it as a CSR model where, like, they contribute in making world a better place and could be a good marketing activity? So out of all these things, where do you see your project, right, working out, creating the, I'll say that, your pitch, right? In a simple terms.
That's a fantastic question. I think it's interesting how we've spent a lot of the last few years looking at CSR and profitability as being almost like two completely separate things. Oftentimes, when we look at corporate social responsibility, a lot of corporations have this perspective that it's it's not a revenue generating activity. It's generally a cost. It's not something that's going to be creating any initial short-term profits. Sometimes there's this evolving perspective where we're starting to see that yes, there actually is long-term gains. However, when I look at reforestry, I look at it as this integration approach where there actually is no difference between CSR and profitability anymore. What we're trying to do here at reforestry, what we are doing is we're actually making social and environmental ethical responsibility integral to the profitability of the systems that we are working in. It's possible to have ethical and profitable supply chains. We don't have to choose anymore. Are we going to like sacrifice our profit margins, or are we going to make the world a better place? Or are we going to just focus solely on earning money at the cost and expense of these communities and our ecosystems? We don't have to look at it that way anymore. And that's kind of integral to our approach here at Reforestry, is finding a way where we can actually bring all of these things together, have it be traceable and transparent, have it be scalable, which today with these technologies is one of the ways that we're able to do this. Previously, if you had to have people that were having to verify and validate every single one of these transactions, how that slows everything down and creates this bottleneck and also this massive cost, prone to lots of different kinds of errors. If you can digitize that entire stream of interactions, creating these ledgers that and these smart contracts in ways where now this seamless experience where it's now just moving through these systems, the verification and validation ocean currents are just constantly moving. We can have these things done in a way where it's actually scalable, it's transparent, it's traceable. There's not going to be these blocking points where people can withhold knowledge from one another. And this is one of the most fantastic opportunities of our time. It's finding ways where we can actually bring CSR and profitability, marry them together, make them just one whole thing. And we don't have to pick or choose whether it's going to be costs or profits. We can have both social and ethical profits taking place every single day. It doesn't have to be a choice anymore. It's about having both.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Benoît. It was a pleasure having you, and with the refreshing perspective of connecting blockchain with how to become better human beings. Thanks a lot.